Alright folks, in this video I'm going to go over installing graphics card. I've got 3 examples we're actually going to go over. And usually the graphics card is pretty much the last step in an installation. Now if you happen to be doing a computer build with say something like an i3-9100, i5-9400, and i7-9700 were the 8th gen versions. I would suggest you complete your build and then come back and put the graphics card. Make sure this will boot to BIOS or to Windows, and then do your graphics card, because these can actually function without a graphics card. Now, if you have one of these processors, i3-9100F or the Ryzen 5 3600X, you will need a graphics card installed to boot to BIOS. So now there are some that are a little trickier than what I just said. So if you have this guy, it has an F in it, okay? So this does not have integrated graphics. So you will need to install a graphics card, all right? So just because this one has a K in it does not mean that you're good to go. Any ones that have F's in them mean you will need a graphics card, all right? All right, so this is kind of a standard selection of graphics cards. We have one here that's going to get all of its power from the PCI Express connector shown here on the bottom. So basically this draws no more than 75 watts, has this assortment of connectors, and obviously to finish this off at the end we'll need to connect a display to it. So the next style has a GPU power connector, in this case an 8-pin. Sometimes they can have 6. This gets a certain amount of power, 75 watts from PCI Express, and then it's going to get probably another 75 watts from that 8-pin connector. Now this guy here is this is AMD RX 5700. It has a 6 and an 8, so it's going to get power from its PCI Express slot and also from the 6 and the 8, probably getting over 200 watts of power needed for this when it's really running good graphics for you, or basically when it's actually being asked to perform some heavy graphical tasks, like obviously in gaming. So the important things to know is that your power supply, which we have right here in this example, that not only it be high enough wattage, but that it have the right connectors to connect your power supply. All right, so in this case we have an 8-pin and a 6-pin, and you would need probably at least 550 watts of power for the RX 5700 that I show. We're just going to go ahead and connect all these things just so you can see them and what the process is. All right, let's start with our easiest graphics card. This was the GTX 750, and we've got our case open. Assume that you'd have all the other stuff done in here. I'd have a CPU in, I'd have RAM. Obviously I've got the power supply in. So I'm going to basically drop this in. Usually it's a good idea to use 2 hands, not 1 hand like I'm doing. And that's going to snap in, all right? Then we're going to come over here on this side and using our Phillips, I believe this is a number 2, and this is a number 632 screw. We're going to go ahead and tighten that down. All right. So assuming I had all the other components in, I would hook up the connector that matches up with my monitor. Let's say I wanted HDMI, or if you sadly are still using VGA or DVI. All right, so you're going to connect one of those, And then eventually, towards the end of this, we'll talk about getting the drivers for it if you don't have a CD-ROM drive. All right, next let's install our RX 5500. This requires an 8-pin connector. So once again, we're going to gently put this in, snap it in place, and over on our power connector, we need an 8-pin. So we will grab this guy. Now, it's always a good idea to not do this with the computer plugged in, just so you know. So whether you have CPU like this, where you don't have to have a graphics card, let's say you put it in afterwards, like I suggested, make sure you unplug it from the wall. All right, so we've got that connection made. Once again, we would go in and line up these holes properly, if I can find them. So this is where you're going to run into a bit of frustration lining these guys up. So I would go ahead and tighten that down, and then once again select, knowing which monitor I have, I would use one of those connections. So a lot of the newer stuff, you have a choice between DisplayPort and HDMI. Some of the older monitors will have DisplayPort, HDMI, DVI, or dual DVI, and then even the older stuff will have that VGA. But in this case, this one only has DisplayPort or HDMI. All right, so for our third example, and this is when you're starting to get into really good gaming. All right, when you have connectors like those for power, you know this thing's drawing some power. If it's a newer one, there are some older cards out there that take a lot of power and don't perform like the newer ones. Okay, once again, slapping in the PCI Express, and in this case, once again, you want to make sure that you have enough power. So in this case, we would need at least 600 watts. If you have the XT version of this, I believe you need 650 or higher. So, and we'll put those guys in. They snap in. And once again, we are going to line this guy up and put our screw in. And once again, we would find the connector that works with this. Being this is newer, it would be DisplayPort or HDMI. So just so you can see an example, this computer actually has an HDMI here and a DisplayPort here. So I can run dual monitors, 3 monitors, whatever with that guy. Over here, I don't have the monitor hooked up, but there you go. Once again, we have a different selection. So this is a RTX 2070 Super. That is the back of an RTX 2070. All right, so after you turn it on, you should not only see the, if it has a light like this guy, so you may or may not see the fan spinning. A lot of times they won't come on until the card gets a little warmer. Some graphics cards, they pretty much right off the bat will turn on. So in this case, you will see the light that comes on, letting you know that it's got power, and just visually make sure that your connectors are good to go. Obviously, when you turn it on, if you get a picture on your screen, that pretty much can tell you that you are good to. All right, the mere fact that we have power, the mere fact that we actually have a picture on our monitor tells us that it is outputting video. Sometimes you'll see the resolution comes in, doesn't match what the monitor is. That definitely can tell you need drivers. A lot of times down here, if you don't see this little speaker deal working here, that also can tell you need drivers. And so let's talk about how you're going to get your drivers. All right, so I'm going to go into Google, and if you don't have a driver disk and you don't have a drive on your computer that'll read DVDs, you're going to type in AMD drivers, or the best thing actually to do is the exact model. So in this case, it's an RTX 2070 Super, and you would type drivers, and that brings you to a link for NVIDIA's page. So I would go in here and up top there's a click for drivers, link for drivers, and I'm going to go in and select the actual type. So we have an RTX 20 series and 2070 Super, and then we would do start search, and boom, we would grab the first one here. Notice there's pretty much a history of the old stuff. You would click on that and it would ask you to download it, and we would do that, and then you would see this down here. So I like to always save it to my desktop, okay, and then run it. So I would save it somewhere or to downloads, click save, and then it's going to go through this. So once it's done with that, you're going to click run, and it's going to go through the installation process. All right, now for AMD, let's go ahead and type in RX 5500 XT drivers, and that's going to bring us to this page. Okay, so drivers and support up here, and theirs is a little different, right? So I go graphics 5500 series, 5500 XT, submit button, and that's going to bring this up. So I have Windows 10, and then I'm going to come over here to download, and same thing, I'm going to save it to my desktop or my downloads, and then when that's done, I'll click on run down here. Okay, so that's basically how you install a graphics card.